So I want you to imagine that you're the CEO of a massive multinational corporation.
Okay, I'm with you.
Right. And one morning, you just decide to personally sue your own accounting department for like $10 billion.
Which is completely absurd on its face.
Totally absurd. But then you only agree to drop that lawsuit if the board of directors lets you keep a massive multi-billion-dollar chunk of that cash, as a personal slush fund to pay off disgruntled former employees.
Right. It sounds like a terrible movie plot.
Exactly. But according to a newly published, just incredibly explosive op-ed, that is exactly the kind of maneuver happening in the Oval Office right now.
Yeah, it really is a staggering scenario, but that is the reality we're unpacking today. The sheer scale of the legal maneuvering here is just genuinely unprecedented.
It really is. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a piece of commentary published today, May 19th, 2026, by Eric Reinhardt. He goes by Jazz, and it's titled, "A President Who Sued His Own IRS and Wants to Pay the Mob."
And we need to be really clear right out of the gate here.
Yes, absolutely. Just to set the stage for you listening, this is a fiery, deeply partisan piece of writing.
Very politically charged.
Right. And our goal today is absolutely not to validate the politics here or, tell you which side to take.
We are looking at this with complete neutrality.
Exactly. We are simply opening up the hood of this argument to see how the engine works. We want to look at the actual mechanics of what Reinhardt is claiming and how he builds this narrative about a sitting president's maneuvers with the Justice Department and the IRS.
And the engine of this argument, it actually starts with a really interesting diagnosis of the reader. Like, before even getting into the political weeds, Reinhardt tackles this phenomenon that I think we all feel on a daily basis.
Oh, the information fatigue.
Right, information fatigue.
Yeah, the idea that these shocking, ugly facts have just become like background noise to us.
Exactly. But let's dig into that for a second, because he's not just using a poetic turn of phrase there. There's a real psychological mechanism at play when we talk about this kind of fatigue.
Right. It's cognitive science. It's related to a concept called shifting baseline syndrome, right?
Yes.
Oh.
Originally, that was a term used in environmental science.
Mm.
So if a species of fish slowly dies off over, say, 50 years, each new generation just accepts that diminished population as the new normal.
Because they don't know any better.
Right. They don't realize what was lost because their baseline shifted. So in the context of modern media consumption, when you are hit with this absolute fire hose of unprecedented, rule-breaking political events day after day.
Your brain's dice line for what is considered a scandal just totally shifts.
Exactly. You become desensitized just to cope with the cognitive overload.
So a 34-count felony conviction just becomes, Tuesday.
Precisely. And the entire mission of Reinhardt's op-ed is an attempt to administer a shock to that system.
He wants to wake us up.
Right. It's an effort to drag those normalized facts out of the background and argue that, hey, these shouldn't just be noise. They should be entirely disqualifying.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's look at the actual catalyst he uses to deliver this shock to the system. The $10 billion lawsuit.
This is where it gets really wild.
I mean, the sitting president sued his own IRS. And not as a private citizen from before his term, but as the guy currently running the executive branch. I have to admit, when I first read this, my brain just short-circuited a bit.
I think everyone's did.
Right. Like, how is that even legally possible? Aren't you basically suing yourself?
You essentially are. It's a completely mind-bending maneuver. From a structural standpoint, the president sits at the top of the executive branch.
Right.
And both the Department of Justice and the IRS report up to him. So by initiating a massive lawsuit against an agency he controls and then having his own Justice Department handle the defense,
he effectively controls both sides of the chessboard. But wait, I have to stop you there. Even if he controls both sides of the lawsuit, how does a dropped lawsuit magically turn into a multi-billion-dollar, what Reinhardt calls a weaponization fund?
that is the big question.
Because doesn't Congress hold the power of the purse? I mean, if the executive branch wants to spend billions of dollars, they have to get legislative approval, don't they?
Usually, yes. But the mechanism here relies on exploiting a very specific and honestly somewhat obscure legal loophole regarding federal settlements.
Okay, I'm listening.
There is something called the Judgment Fund. It's this permanent, indefinite appropriation created by Congress to pay out settlements when the government gets sued.
Oh, so it's like the federal government's liability insurance payout account.
That's a great way to put it. Normally, it's used for mundane things, like if a postal truck hits a civilian's car, the government settles, and the money comes out of this fund.
Right, makes sense. So what's the loophole?
The loophole is that the executive branch has broad discretion to settle lawsuits without going back to Congress for a new, specific appropriation.
Wait, oh wow.
Yeah. So if the president's lawyers sue the IRS, and then the president's DOJ decides to, quote-unquote, settle that lawsuit rather than fight it.
They can essentially direct money right out of that permanent settlement fund.
Exactly. Without Congress doing a thing.
It's like playing Monopoly, being the banker, suing yourself for landing on your own property, and then just taking cash out of the vault to settle the dispute.
That is a perfect analogy. It creates this completely closed settlement loop, a snake eating its own tail, but, the tail is made of taxpayer dollars.
Wow. And the stated purpose of this newly extracted pool of money, according to Reinhart, is to cut checks to individuals who claim they were unfairly targeted by law enforcement during the previous Biden administration.
Right. So he is bypassing the legislative branch entirely to create this slush fund.
And Reinhart describes this as a total abandonment of law and order. He calls it let me find the quote right, a mob boss mentality in a presidential suit.
Which is just a scathing characterization. He's arguing it's a complete subversion of institutional norms. The executive branch has been effectively hijacked to serve a personal grievance settlement process.
But, a slush fund is really only as powerful as the people it pays. Which brings us to what might be the most alarming part of Reinhardt's entire argument.
The beneficiaries.
Right, who is actually getting these checks. Because this isn't just about administrative overreach anymore. Reinhardt makes it about loyalty. He claims that this multi-billion-dollar fund can be used to pay January 6th defendants.
The very people who broke into the Capitol.
Yeah, and this is where the argument shifts, right? It goes from a critique of a legal loophole to a warning about a genuine existential threat.
Exactly. The assertion is that these aren't just random disgruntled citizens getting payouts. Reinhardt is pointing out that these are specific individuals who violently tried to stop the transfer of power.
I have to ask, though, and I really struggled with this part of the argument when I read it, is Reinhardt exaggerating for rhetorical effect here?
How so?
I mean, practically speaking, how can Department of Justice funds be used as a retroactive reward system for convicted rioters? Doesn't that cross some kind of massive legal line that even a settlement loophole can't protect?
Well, the mechanism of justification is the key here. The administration doesn't put it on paper as a reward for rioting.
Obviously. So what do they call it?
They label it compensation for political persecution.
Oh, wow.
Right. By asserting that the previous administration's Justice Department acted corruptly in prosecuting these individuals, the current administration can claim it's simply righting a civil rights wrong.
So they settle civil claims brought by the rioters against the government.
Exactly. The checks are cut under the guise of legal restitution.
Wow. Okay, so on the official paperwork, it's a civil rights settlement, but functionally, Reinhardt is saying it acts as an ATM for the mob.
Yes. And to really drive home why this is so deeply alarming, Reinhardt forces the reader to look back at the reality of January 6th itself.
He strips away all the years of political spin.
Right. He zeroes in on the raw chronological timeline of that day. He juxtaposes the violence at the Capitol directly with the inaction from the Oval Office.
And the image he paints is incredibly disturbing. He reminds us that the president was watching the attack unfold on television for hours.
While lawmakers were literally sheltering in place.
Yeah. And the vice president was being actively hunted through the halls of the Capitol. But instead of walking down to the briefing room to immediately demand a halt, there were tweets attacking his own vice president.
The clock just kept running while the violence escalated.
Yeah, Reinhardt points out that the president had every opportunity to go live and say, "Leave now, this is not who we are." But he didn't.
And what's fascinating here is the hierarchy of values demonstrated in that specific moment. In a crisis, what a leader chooses to protect tells you everything about their priorities.
Right.
Reinhardt argues he didn't choose to protect the officers taking the beatings. He didn't protect his staff or the Constitution. He chose to protect the mob.
And when a message was finally recorded, the language wasn't even a rebuke. It was soft, affectionate even.
We love you. You're very special.
Exactly. We love you. You're very special. So Reinhardt is saying, if you pair that affection on the day of the riot with this new multi-billion-dollar settlement fund today, the argument is that he is essentially using the federal government to back pay his loyalists.
It paints a picture of a leader who sees the state not as a public trust, but as a personal piggy bank for enforcing loyalty.
But, okay, here's where it gets really interesting. To cement this idea, Reinhardt knows he has to demonstrate how this behavior scales.
Right, because if you're trying to prove a lifelong pattern, you can't just look at what a politician does with the Justice Department.
You have to look at how they manage their own private life, which means shifting the lens from the public executive to the private individual.
And if the core argument is that the settlement loophole behavior is a deep-seated trait, Reinhardt has to show that using money to bury inconvenient truths is a consistent reflex.
Exactly. The lens widens to show that the behavior is consistent across all domains. And the evidence he presents for that reflex is just this rapid-fire list of past scandals.
Things that most people probably haven't thought about in a while.
Right. Purely because of that shifting baseline syndrome we talked about earlier. I mean, he reminds us we're talking about a convicted felon.
34 felony counts returned by a jury.
For falsifying business records, specifically to hide a hush money payoff tied to an election. And Reinhardt is very careful here. He doesn't frame this as a partisan witch hunt. He grounds it firmly as a documented court record.
That reliance on the physical court record is highly intentional on Reinhardt's part. It bypasses the usual political spin entirely. That's not spin, he writes, that's the court record.
Yeah, but he doesn't stop there. He digs into the audio tape bragging about grabbing women by their genitals, and Reinhardt really emphasizes the word bragged.
It wasn't a whispered confession, it was a boast.
Right. Then there is the $130,000 paid by a fixer to silence Stormy Daniels after a sexual encounter that happened right after his wife gave birth.
The trail of infidelity across multiple marriages.
And what Reinhardt calls his consistent treatment of vows as props rather than commitments, it is relentless to hear it all stacked up like that in one paragraph.
It is relentless by design. He refuses to let these ugly facts fade into the background.
But I think I understand the rhetorical strategy now. By taking that $130,000 personal hush money payment and placing it right next to the $10 billion IRS lawsuit, the sheer scale of the behavior snaps into focus.
It's the exact same tactic.
Yeah. You use money and power to bury a problem, you buy silence or loyalty, and then you loudly claim the truth is fake news when it inevitably leaks out.
It is the micro and the macro of the exact same instinct. And this is why breaking through that information fatigue is so vital to Reinhardt's argument.
Because if you don't...
Right. If you let the hush money or the 34 felonies fade into the background as just personal baggage, you completely miss the operational blueprint of how this person actually governs.
The argument here is incredibly direct. The character is the policy.
The character is the policy. The man who treats marriage vows as procs is the exact same man treating the Justice Department as a prop.
Wow. The character is the policy. That is a really powerful way to frame it. Which brings us to the linchpin of the whole thing. The overarching narrative that actually bridges those past hush money cover-ups with the current taxpayer-funded payouts.
The 2020 election.
Yes, the foundational lie. It is the connective tissue for everything we've discussed today.
Reinhardt argues that the refusal to accept the 2020 loss is the catalyst for the riot, and the riot is the catalyst for this new weaponization fund.
Because the insistence that the election was stolen continues to this day. This is despite losing over 60 court cases.
Despite federal agencies run by his own appointees, mind you calling it the most secure election in modern history.
Right. Despite endless recounts and audits confirming the results, Reinhardt synthesizes it all so brutally. He lost. He refused to accept it. A mob stormed the Capitol based on that refusal.
And now the Justice Department is being rigged to cut checks to the very people who carried that lie into the Capitol.
So what does this all mean for the reader? Reinhardt brings a very heavy ultimatum right to the doorstep of the listener.
He completely rejects the whole both sides political framing.
Totally. He fundamentally states that if you, as a voter or a citizen, quietly accept this new IRS settlement maneuver as just another weird political headline,
You are implicitly accepting the original lie that fueled the violence in the first place.
you're essentially funding the revisionist history.
Precisely. You are financing the normalization of an attempted subversion of democracy. Reinhardt strips away the campaign slogans, the flags, the talk show spin.
And he leaves you with a stark bulleted list. A convicted felon in the Oval Office. A man who bragged about sexual assault.
A man who watched the Capitol be attacked while his vice president fled.
And now, a man converting government funds to pay those attackers. He leans heavily on that famous Maya Angelou sentiment to close it out, right?
When someone shows you who they are, believe them.
Believe them, yeah. The assertion is that there is no more mystery to uncover here. We've seen the character in courtrooms, we've heard it on audio tapes, we watched it live on television on January 6th.
And now we're seeing it in the cynical manipulation of these executive agencies.
The true nature has been fully broadcast.
There is zero ambiguity left about the future because the pattern is locked in. It's one continuous thread of self-preservation and rewarding loyalty at the expense of the country. Reinhart leaves no room for debate on this point. He says the man will not change.
So the only variable left in the equation is us.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, let's take a breath and zoom out to look at the ground we've covered today. We started with what seemed like a bizarre administrative anomaly.
A sitting president suing his own IRS for $10 billion.
Right, and then exploiting a settlement loophole to bypass Congress and create a multi-billion-dollar slush fund.
And from there, we unpack the terrifying mechanics of how that fund is designed to act as retroactive compensation for the mob that breached the Capitol.
Essentially disguising payouts for loyalty as civil rights settlements. And we saw how Reinhart connects this current abuse of state power to a decades-long personal pattern. A pattern of using money to bury truth and evade accountability.
Regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, analyzing an argument structured like this is really a masterclass in trying to pierce through modern apathy.
It's an aggressive attempt to cure shifting baseline syndrome.
It demands that we stop looking at these events as isolated, confusing headlines and start recognizing them as a cohesive, overwhelming culmination of behavior.
It forces a confrontation with our own capacity for outrage because normalizing these events means accepting a reality where the abnormal is simply the new standard operating procedure. Which leaves us with a deeply unsettling question to mull over long after you finish listening to this deep dive. If this op-ed is right, if the public has truly become so desensitized that a president paying off rioters with taxpayer money is just another blip on the radar.
How do we fix that?
Right. In a modern, hyper-polarized world where we are subjected to a fire hose of shocking information every single day, what would it fundamentally take to shift our cognitive baseline back to reality?
It's a tough question.
When the blur of daily scandals has made us completely numb, what does a truly disqualifying fracture even look like anymore?